means for every donation that you make, it will be worth more than double that to us. If you donate $10, the foundation will give us at least another $10. You can donate using Venmo, PayPal, or credit card. And if you donate with cash, please add your name and donation amount to the sheets at the back where the donation jars are. And if you want to give us your email, we will email you a receipt for your donation. Okay. Now the regular house announcements. For the metal chairs, I think everybody who wants one probably has one of the seat cushions, the chair pads. If you want a second one, there's a box full of them. We now have a snack and drink vending machine in the back. The snack and drink vending machine has we have a coffee pods and a Keurig machine if you want to buy a coffee pod and make a cup of coffee, or hot chocolate, or decaf. I think are the choices that we have. At the Kelly Center, BYOB is permitted for all shows. Did anybody actually bring a six-pack today? Not this show. Okay. Who's in this room for the very first time today? Show of hands? Oh, wow. Welcome. Yeah, it's usually we get about half the room is brand new. So a few things about us. The Kelly Music for Life is a 501c nonprofit organization. Our mission is to promote music, the arts, and community. We have programs for children, teens, and adults. You can also rent the space for private events. The Kelly Center features art and music you won't find anywhere else in the area. We also offer educational opportunities to students interested in music and technology. In fact, many of our sound and video techs are high school students. Today, our student techs running the sound and video are May and Ella. Thank you for being here. Some housekeeping announcements. The restrooms are down the hallway to my left on the right-hand side. The hand dryers are quite loud, so during the show, we ask you to use the paper towels in there. The Kelly Center is a listening room. Please silence your phones and step outside to make or take a phone call. Smoking or vaping is prohibited inside the Kelly Center. Our walls feature the work of local artists. This month, the month of April, is the work of Carl Fehrenbach. If you or someone you know is an artist and would like to display your work, contact us. There's no fee. We just display the work for at least a month. We have open jams here at the Kelly Center, free to attend or participate. Every month we do a bluegrass jam, a slow jam, Django swing jam, drum circle, Irish trad sessions. We have an open mic night and a folk song campfire jam. Players of all skill levels are welcome to participate. These are free to play or just listen and enjoy. And BYOB is welcome to those too. Upcoming shows. Next Saturday we have a huge bluegrass bonanza featuring Wanamaker Lewis, Mark Schultz and the Wayne Rangers, and Alfred Poor's Bluegrass Band. Almost done. Okay. The Kelly Center relies on contributions, large and small. We thank our premier supporters, Haverford Township Civic Council, the Radio Agency, the JMC Fund, the Connolly Foundation, Joel Perlish Photography, and of course your contributions as well. If you or your company would like to support our work, please contact us. I mentioned we have cash donation jars in the back. You can throw whatever you like in those. And Joel Perlish is our house photographer. Photos from every single Kelly event is on the photo link on our website. Over 30,000 photos that Joel has taken for us over the last 5 years. Today's Joel's assistant, Christian, is getting things started. He's shooting the show. Joel will be here a little bit later. Okay, on with the show. Today you will hear arrangements of the music from the famous 1965 film, The Sound of Music. In addition, you'll learn a little bit about the history of the Rio Von Trapp family, the writing of the songs, and the making of the movie. There will also be plenty of opportunities for audience participation. Please welcome them back to the Kelly Center stage in Havertown, Pennsylvania, the Patrick Kerssen Trio.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
My name is Patrick Kerssen. Thank you guys for coming out. We're doing The Sound of Music today. I do have a whole slide thing set up, so if you can't see that, you might want to grab a different spot. We've got a lot of music and things to talk about, and we're going to jump right on in here. So, first, there is one basic concept you have to know as we talk about the music and things and how it's put together and whatnot, and that is basically jazz and really all music is all about chords. And so the major scale, these chords are based on the major scale. You've heard the major scale. You've especially heard the major scale if you're here today, because they use it in The Sound of Music quite a bit. You can see where this is going. The chord on each scale, you can kind of build a chord on each scale. There's 8 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you've got, for your 1 chord, we call it 1 chord, you just build a chord based on that. And your 2 chord, you build a chord based on the 2nd note. The 3 chord based on the 3rd note, etc., etc., etc. That's how we kind of do all of this music. So C would be the 1 chord, D would be 2 chord, whatever. Does that make sense? Does that make some sense? Hopefully. Does that make sense? No? Face doesn't get it? Okay. So the other method of using this is to use what we call solfege, which again, you can see where this is going. This is where we use syllables to represent each note, which would be do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, which you may be familiar with if you're here at a Sound of Music show. If you're not, you probably should have watched the movie before you came. This is an extremely popular music education technique. It's popular with a method called the COTA method. It's Hungarian. It's how we teach kids to sing in elementary schools. It's big in Europe and it's big in here. There's some music teachers that are like strict adherents to like we use solfege because of the COTA method. And that's kind of what Maria does in the movie. And most people have probably heard of them because of the Sound of Music. So we're going to start with do, re, mi, obviously. And so this was actually, you know, the show, The Sound of Music, was a Rodgers and Hammerstein show. Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rodgers. I almost said Roy Rogers. If I do that, somebody correct me, please. Rodgers and Hammerstein only provided in this song. They only provided the end bit, the where they like so do la fa mi do re. That's all that Richards and Rodgers did. A woman named a woman named Trudy Rittman actually did most of the arranging and most of the song. But she doesn't really get a lot of the credit because that's kind of what happens in movies. They kind of like have like these underwriters and things like that. So it was mostly Rittman, and she did a lot of other Rodgers and Hammerstein kind of things. She did the South Pacific arranging, the Carousel arranging, the King and I, all of their like really famous collaborations was mostly actually Rittman doing most of the arranging and stuff. So all the arrangements that you like were mostly her. But I thought the most interesting part of this song, as I was doing my research for this, is that the syllables in other languages are different. I never thought about it before, but it makes sense. Do in Spanish is not a deer, a female deer. You know, re is not a drop of golden sun in Spanish. Do in Spanish, I have some examples on the left there. Donde empieza la lección, recordando una canción. That's do. Where does the lesson begin? Donde. Where does the lesson begin, or where the lesson begins? And then recordando una canción is remembering a song. In German, do das ist ein Flut mit now, which I think is hilarious. The Donau is the river in Germany, so do is a river with now. So they had to add now. That seems like a stretch to me. And then re das gibt's in Wälder schon. That is actually like forest creatures, like animals in the woods. So they had to change it for every dub that they did of this song in other languages. And Julie Andrews sang all of the different languages, like in the dubs, it's all Julie Andrews singing all that stuff. So Julie Andrews, newsflash, breaking news, was really good at her job. Now Charmian Carr is real last name is Charmian. Sorry. Her real last name was Farnan. She played Liesel. She said that this song was really weird when they were filming it because they filmed it. It was a montage, so it was kind of filmed in all these different little tiny bits and pieces. And they were like, "What the heck is this going to turn into?" And then when they actually watched the movie, they were like, "Oh, that's really cool. We're in the mountains and all this stuff." But they were doing it like 2 or 3 notes at a time or whatever, so it was kind of weird. And then, like I said before, it was kind of based on the Kodai solfege stuff, and then also they did it like based on bell choirs, you know. So like the bell choirs, each person has a bell or 2, and then they have to ring their bell, and that's kind of how they arranged a song where each kid sang do or re or mi like a bell choir. And that was a Trudy Rittman thing. So we're going to start off here with do re mi, which makes sense because the first line is, of course, let's start at the very beginning, which is where we are. See, I think things through. I got some stuff happening there. So anyway, here is Do Re Mi. different anyway. So, yeah, so some do, re, mi. I tried to make so these are not intended to be jazz songs, generally speaking. So I tried to make the arrangements as close to the originals as I can. So if you want to sing along to any of this, be as obnoxious as you want. That is totally fine by me. You can yell and scream. I do not care. Yeah. So to continue here, so I mentioned it was a Rodgers and Hammerstein kind of collaboration. Richard Rodgers was 1902 to 1979. Oscar Hammerstein was a little bit older than him, 1895 to 1960. They first collaborated in 1920 on Fly With Me, which was a Columbia University musical. Rodgers was a student, and Hammerstein was like a judge for like a kind of a competition sort of thing they were doing. And so Richard Rodgers wrote most of that, and then Hammerstein contributed 2 songs after. He was like, that was pretty good. Let me see what I can help you out with a little bit. So that's how they kind of started collaborating. But then they didn't get together again until the early 40s when they got on Oklahoma, which Oklahoma for us now in 2024 is kind of just like, yeah, Oklahoma, sure, that's a musical that we're aware of. But at the time it was very groundbreaking because until then, musicals were the word that I kept coming across as I was researching this was frivolous. They weren't like very serious, weighty topics or anything like that. It was always very like, here's some light, fun stuff. The songs don't really have anything to do with the plot. We just needed a silly little song in there. And a lot of times they were built around a single like star, like they would have like a big singer and they would like build a musical around that person. But Rodgers and Hammerstein were like, no, we're gonna like actually talk about stuff. They did, racism, they did sexism, they did like heavier topics as opposed to just like, here's some fun campy stuff to take your mind off the fact that we're in the Great Depression and it stinks. You know what I mean? So they were kind of the first people to do that. And they complemented each other very well. Hammerstein, generally speaking, liked to write all of the words first to like everything without having any music. And then Richard Rodgers preferred to write music after all of the lyrics were completed. So sometimes like when they worked with other people, they would have to like, okay, we're gonna write the lyrics to this song, and then on that song we're gonna have to write, and they would have to kind of mix it up. But they preferred to work in kind of ways that were complementary to each other, which is why they stuck together doing these things for so long. And as I said, they kind of changed how musical theater worked quite a bit with the different plots and actually like having the songs advance the plots was another thing. The songs were just kind of like unrelated, kind of random things kind of thrown in there for the fact that like it's a musical and we need music. Whereas then in Oklahoma they were like, let's actually make the songs push the plot forward, which was kind of new at the time. Again, to us that seems super normal. That's just how all Broadway plays work. But back then it was kind of a revolutionary thing. They wrote, the 2 of them together wrote a ton of really famous stuff. Oklahoma was kind of their first like big massive hit, but South Pacific was them. The King and I, Carousel, State Fair. They did the original Cinderella. It was for TV, not the stage originally, but that was also them. And then of course The Sound of Music. And just in case you weren't thinking like, these guys don't do anything, they won 34 Tony Awards, so they did all right, I would say. So yeah. Now, just a couple of things as we continue on here. So musical theater songwriting is a little different than a lot of other songwriting. The big thing that drives me personally crazy is the verses that they have in musical theater. They will kind of have like these long opening sections that are like rubato and not really rhythmic. And it comes from recitative, there it is, in opera, which is kind of where they just sing arrhythmically to kind of move the plot forward, even though it's not quite the song yet. That was a big operatic thing. Made its way into musical theater later. They kind of would adapt the rhythms of the song. They could do whatever they want with them, so it kind of sounded like regular talking, even though they were doing notes and things like that. So that's kind of what verses are. And Rodgers and Hammerstein did a ton of these. They're usually rubato, which just means they're free-flowing and arrhythmic, to use the musical term. Another thing that they would do a lot is they would have the circle of fifths, which is chord progression. Each chord is kind of followed by a chord 5 notes away from it. If you remember that major scale stuff, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If you start on the 5, you go 5 notes away from it. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your next chord. And then you go 5 notes away from that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your next chord. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's your next chord. That's a really common circle of fifths progression that they were using in a lot of musical theater, Rodgers and Hammerstein especially. And then AABA is the song form that they use. And that's basically, you start with one section, you do it again, AA, you you do a new section, B. Then you go back to the first section. That's A. Just to show you that a little bit. This is the chart here for 16 going on 17. You do not know how to read music to understand this. In the blue, yeah, that's blue. In the blue, you've got the V there on the top, and then rubato. It says that's the verse, and it's nice and slow and free flowing. And then when you get to A down there underneath, it says easy swing. That's when we're gonna go into time, and that's very typical of this musical theater type of songwriting, kind of free flowing, and then we get into time. And usually when you get into time, that's the part of the song that everybody like knows, so you'll recognize that part more likely than you are to recognize the verse. And then the circle fifth progression are in green. If you look at the one on the third line there, the G, you got G to C minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 notes. Then you got C to B. B is a substitute chord for F, but C to F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's another 5. B flat to E flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. E flat to A flat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's always that fives thing. That's very common. And sometimes they'll do substitutions and things like that, but it's always based on 5 notes from the previous chord. And then just to see the form here, in the blue, you've got the A sections, and then if you see those little purple things that are circled there, those are repeat signs, so that's how you know it happens twice. So you got AA, and then the bridge is the red, which is the B section, and then you go back down on the bottom to another blue section, the A section, and that's how they built most of musical theater music for like the entirety of the 30s through 50s, I would argue even 60s, you know, until they started getting into some different stuff. So that is how we're going to explain a little bit of 16 going on 17. Now, Charmian Carr was actually 21 while filming this, so that was a lie. She was not 16 going on 17. That was not true. And Daniel Truitt, who played Rolf, was 22, so also a lie, but they were at least a year apart, so that's something, I guess. And funny enough, Daniel Truitt, the guy who played Rolf, actually married the understudy for Liesl. They got together while on the Sound of Music set, and then they got married. They did later get divorced, but you know that kind of makes sense based on how deeply creepy this song is that he would get married to somebody and get divorced. So anyway, when filming this scene, this is a brief disclaimer here. My fiance loves the Sound of Music and read a bunch of autobiographies of all these people over the years. So all these fun facts, largely her, much appreciated. But so when filming this scene, the costumers forgot to put on the non-slip pads on the bottom of Charmian Carr's shoes. And so she jumped up on a bench and she ate it. And she put her foot through the window of the gazebo and she sprained her ankle. And so she filmed the rest of this in like total agony. That will be a theme for the child actors in this movie, actually. I think the laws were a little lighter back then on what you could do with child actors. But she sprained her ankle, filmed it in extreme pain. You can apparently see the tape on her ankle if you look closely for the rest of the scene. I think it happens the first bench she jumps up on. I think that's where it would happen. That's the only place it made sense when I watched the clip, that she would have like slipped and gone through the window. And it was like right before the whole dance break. So it was just like really inconveniently timed. She like absolutely wrecked herself and then had to do the whole run around dance break. She probably had a really, really bad time, but it came out okay, I would say. And this is one of the tunes that is really popularly referenced. It's in Family Guy, it's in the Orville. It might just be, what's his name? Seth. Which Seth is Family Guy? Seth MacFarlane, thank you. Seth MacFarlane really maybe just liked Sound of Music because he's in Orville. That was his show too. It's in Mad Men. It appears in a ton of different shows, so it's very, very widely referenced. So we're going to do 16 going on 17. We're going to do a kind of nice slow stride kind of thing, Errol Gardner-esque. And you'll hear the verse. It'll be nice and slow and rubato, and then I'm going to count them in, and then we'll be in time, and then you're on A, A, B, A. So again, if you'd like to sing along, feel free. This one's a little creepy, but you know, do what you want to do. Here we go. Rolf was super creepy, and he turned out to be a Nazi. So bullet dodge, Liesel, way to go. So one of the big things that theater music does that isn't not, it's not that it's not compatible with jazz, it's just that jazz musicians don't tend to do it that often, is key changes. Theater composers live on key changes. That is all they do, all the time, on every song. That's an exaggeration, but only slightly. There's a lot of different ways to change a key. Sometimes you use a pivot chord, sometimes you use a pivot note, where like a chord works in both keys, and then you go to a new key where a note works in both keys, and then you go to a new key from there. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And sometimes though in theater they'll just be like, we're getting bored, let's change the key. And they'll just decide to do it, just out of the blue. And musicians reading those books hate that, because we always miss something that happens at that point. I know it kicked my butt back when I did a lot of theater shows. Oftentimes they'll use them to get from one section of a song to another, or maybe at the end of the song to kind of add some drama. That's a very popular thing. And they kind of act as just like a lift. You've heard it in a million different theater songs. I wrote a good example. I personally think it's an egregious example, but the Josh Groban version of You Raise Me Up, if you've ever heard that, there's a big fat honking key change at the end where he just like, he plays it and then they stop for a second and then they just are like, here's a new key. It's so corny, but it gets the job done because everybody loves it, except for me apparently. But so that's kind of a way, and that's a very like theater-ish kind of key change, you know what I mean? So that's very common. And so they do that. The next one we're gonna do is I Have Confidence, and there's a big long verse in this one, that big rubato section, and they do this key changing thing quite a lot in this song. I think there's 4 key changes in the original, which is just obscene, personally. That's too many, you know. It's like at that point, maybe you need a more interesting melody. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
Have you ever been in a pit and you're like, man, this singer really doesn't know what key this is in, and then it's you?
Yeah.
That has happened to me so many times.
Yeah. But anyway, so this happens in I Have Confidence quite a bit in the verse. And this is the top example there. In the blue, there's a D flat and then it's a C sharp. They're the same note. And he uses the note over a D flat chord. And then he uses it over an A chord. And that leads us to a new key. Just because he used that same note and he surrounds it with different notes. So when he's doing these notes, it sounds like we're there. Chord, that leads us to the new key. So that's kind of one very common way to get to new key changes. Other times they will just throw a chord that doesn't work in one key but works in the new key. So that bottom example, they're kind of cruising along in one key. Here's a new chord. Now we're somewhere else. You know what I mean? Sometimes they'll just throw it in really fast. That's that last chord over there in the green. And then they're in a new key. You know, so that's another way that they kind of get from one key to the other. And then in this one, I didn't do it in this particular arrangement, but they change key, I think, 2 more times after they do the initial key changes and whatnot there. So we're gonna go to I Have Confidence here. This is one of the 2 songs that was actually not in the original stage play. And so it was one of the 2 songs that had nothing, that Oscar Hammerstein didn't contribute anything to, because he passed away actually 9 months after the stage play premiered. He wasn't alive for when the movie was made and came out and everything. So this was all Richard Rodgers. He wrote the lyrics and the music. Normally Hammerstein was the lyricist and Rodgers did the music. But the theater productions, they didn't actually put this one in the stage play until like the 80s, even though the movie came out in 1965. So they kind of held off on this one and kept the original songs in. But Petula Clark did the role of Maria in the London revival in 1981, and that's when they started putting in this song into the stage play, as well as obviously the musical. Some later productions still left it out. In 2013, it was like one of those NBC, you know, like on TV kind of theater specials they did with Jesus Christ Superstar a few years ago and things like that. And they cast Carrie Underwood as Maria. I don't really have anything against Carrie Underwood. I think she sings nice and everything, but I don't really know that that's a match. I didn't watch it though, so maybe it was better, but it was apparently very polarizing. Some people were not a fan of her interpretation of it, but anyway, here's I Have Confidence. That's already think I was up to 4 when I stopped counting. There's at least one more. So yeah, they really like their key changes.
Finding her
Theater.
confidence.
It's confidence.
She was
Yeah.
finding it.
She was finding it. That makes sense. We'll go with that. All right. So like I said before, Richard Rodgers and Oscar Hammerstein wrote a ton of musicals, and a lot of them were really successful and popular. And a lot of the songs from those musicals became jazz standards. You've got What a Beautiful Morning, Sir with the Fringe on Top, People Say We're in Love, that's all from Just Oklahoma. Hello Young Lovers, Might As Well Be Spring. And then individually, or with other collaborators, Rodgers also was with Lorenz Hart a lot. So all those songs, Have You Met Miss Jones, All Things You Are, Old Man River, Can't Help I'm That Man, Kitsville Dream On, Blue Room Isn't Romantic, Blue Moon, Bewitched, My Funny Valentine. There was like 20 more that I just did not feel like listing. They wrote a ton of jazz standards, so all the repertoire that jazz musicians play, a lot of it comes from musical theater, especially people like Rodgers and Hammerstein. So now, there are a few differences between the way that jazz musicians play these songs and musical theaters people play these songs, obviously. I'm not singing, for one thing, and you should all say thank you for that. So you're welcome. The big thing, though, is we changed the chord changes a lot in jazz music from these theater songs. So, for example, and we're going to play one from another one of their musicals. We're going to take a brief break from the Sound of Music, but theater chords tend to be more diatonic. They don't tend to have too many notes outside of the major scale. The theater changes to this next one are very, they so you can see the difference. This is the examples there are from It Might As Well Be Spring, and the theater changes, the original changes are the ones on top. That's C6, D minor, E minor, A7, D minor, G7. Those are very straight up and together and square maybe would be the word. Erica said it, not me, but she is correct. And then the bottom changes are more the jazz changes. That's where you'll start on that same C chord, but then you'll adjust. You'll put that kind of bluesy sound, and then you some chromatic stuff in there. You get a lot more interesting sounds that way, and that's why jazz musicians do it. Because one thing we do quite often is get bored with whatever we're playing, so we throw a lot of different changes and things like that in there. And then the other thing too is with these chords and these other things, that's why jazz musicians don't do key changes as much, or part of why I should say. Part of it is because, well, we know the song in one key and we don't always feel like transposing it, even though we know how to. We don't always feel like it. But the other thing is, like, rather than using key changes and like big lush string orchestrations and things like that, sometimes there's only three of us here. You know what I mean? We can't just call up some strings and be like, hey, can you like help add us a little beef here? You know what I mean? So we'll use improvising and different chords and things like that to kind of heighten things and change the feel and the atmosphere of the song as we're doing it, as opposed to like, let's change the key 10 times. On the last one, I did change the key 10 times, but that's just because that's what they did on the other one, and we're trying to be kind of accurate. So anyway, we're gonna do one from State Fair. We're gonna do one non-Sound of Music song, and this is Oscar Hammerstein and Richard Rogers again. This is State Fair. This is one of their other successful collaborations, and this is a big jazz standard. Miles Davis did it. Gene Harris, the piano player, did a lot of different versions of this. So Art Blakey, I think, has a version of this. Clifford Brown, a lot of different jazz musicians. So if you're into that sort of thing, just punch in this song and you'll probably find 10 different versions. So here he is. It Might As Well Be Spring. State Fair. And yeah, tried to use the jazz changes. Now, speaking of jazz changes, one jazz musician that's especially associated with the sound of music is John Coltrane, famous saxophone player from Philadelphia, well, originally from North Carolina, but grew up largely in Philadelphia. And he was one of the most important jazz musicians of the 50s and 60s and really all of jazz history. He probably had one of the most famous interpretations of any of these Rodgers and Hammerstein songs, especially from the Sound of Music. This is his version of My Favorite Things. He had McCoy Tyner on piano, who's one of the most important piano players of all time, also a Philly guy. Elvin Jones, one of the most important drummers, and Steve Davis, who frankly I not really know much about beyond this particular record. And it was produced actually by Neşvi Ertegun, who was a Turkish guy who was in charge of Atlantic Records. He produced Ray Charles, he produced the Drifters, tons of other R&B and soul acts as well as the jazz stuff. So the Rodgers and Hammerstein tentacles kind of really reach out into a lot of different genres. And interesting, I didn't really realize this, but Coltrane's favorite song that he ever recorded apparently was My Favorite Things. So the other thing about it is John Coltrane actually released a whole album of all of the songs from My Favorite Things, but it never actually got released until like 40 or 50 years later. He recorded it, it was every song, and he really loved this musical, but it got released 50 years later, and now it's impossible to find. You can't even find it on the internet. So it exists, and I could not find it, which would have been really helpful as I put together jazz arrangements for this, but anyway, it's out there. You might have to order it from like Japan or something like that. They tend to have everything over there. But anyway, so My Favorite Things, probably one of the most popular one of the most popular film songs and one of the most popular songs from this film. Originally it was sung in the stage play, not by Maria, comforting the children, but by Mother Abbess, comforting Maria as she was getting ready to leave. So they changed it for the movie and the stage play. And they did that quite a bit, actually. We'll talk more about that. Instead, during the scene where she's comforting the children during the thunderstorm, she's actually singing The Lonely Goat Herd in the stage play, but they switched it up for the movie. Kind of has become a Christmas standard, even though it was not. No one knows why. I mean, it makes a little sense, but not that much. But yeah, you'll hear this a lot at Christmas time. Jazz people cover it. Ariana Grande snuck it into one of her recent songs, Seven Rings. Diana Ross and the Supremes did it. Some country singers do it. It's kind of really spread out into anything you can think of. And while we're not on it now, but you know, calling back to the immense pain that Liesl was in during 16 going on 17. Nicholas Hammond, who was Friedrich in the movie, he shot this also in immense pain because he naturally had brown hair, but they decided last minute that he was going to be blonde in the movie. And so this was the first scene that they filmed, and apparently dyeing hair back then was like a very painful process because they just put stuff that burned your scalp in your head, I guess. Chemical burn basically on his whole head, and so when he was filming this, like they did the dyeing of his hair like right before they filmed this, so he was having a really bad time. So yeah, needed some help, I would say. He needed some of his favorite things. That's fair. Yeah, a little dodgy about making sure that these children were not in pain while filming this movie, but it's a classic scene, so I guess it worked out. And anyway, so we're going to do My Favorite Things here, kind of loosely based on the Coltrane version, but, you know, we don't have saxophone, and that version is 14 minutes, and we don't have 14 minutes. So, here we go. That was my favorite thing, based very loosely on the John Coltrane version. Because again, that's 14 minutes long, and we don't have 14 minutes. Frankly, on the records that they had at that time, I'm surprised they had 14 minutes. But anyway, now the most interesting thing about The Sound of Music to me is that the actual movie story is way less interesting than the actual story that happened with the Von Trapps. So bear with me, there's a lot happening here. So we're going to go through it here, though. So it was the real family, Georg and Maria Von Trapp, were real family that happened. They were in Austria and everything. But they made a lot of alterations for the stage play and the film. She was actually a nun in training, a postulant is what they call that, at Nonnberg Alley, that's the real thing, in 1923. But when she was hired to work for the family, she was hired only as a teacher to the second oldest daughter, not as a governess to the entire family. So that was one inaccuracy. That was in 1926. She eventually kind of became, she started to care for all of the children, both literally and figuratively. And so she went back to the Abbey after Georg asked her to marry him, and they got married at the Abbey in November of 1927. Maria was not happy about it, actually. They were not in love. Some of the quotes were like pretty biting. She was like, I didn't really love this guy that much. I loved the children, so that was cool, but like really, I just wanted to be a nun. And we'll talk about why she ended up marrying him anyway a little bit later. But so Maria and Georg only had 3 children. The 7 of them were originally, like in the movie, from a previous marriage that he was widowed from. His first wife had died of scarlet fever in 1922. So then Maria, they got married in the later 20s, and then the Depression hit, and they had a very bad time because Georg had all of his money in one bank, and then his friend had a bank, and he transferred his money to his friend's bank, all of his savings and stuff. And then the Depression happened, and his friend's bank failed, so they had $0 then because the bank failed. So he got really hit hard by the Depression, and so to survive, they discharged all the servants, and they moved up in the top floor of the house, and they started boarding people in the lower rooms, the bottom floors. And that's how they met Father Franz Wassner, who was actually the one who taught the children to sing in real life. He was loosely portrayed by Max Detweiler in the film, but they really departed from the actual role there, as we'll talk about here. So he kind of got them up to speed with singing and everything, doing like liturgical music and madrigals and Austrian folk songs and things like that. And then a famous opera singer of the time named Lottie Lehmann heard them sing, suggested that they do a concert, and that kind of one thing led to another. They started touring in 1935. Austria was annexed by Germany then in March of 1938. All the events of the film took place a lot earlier relative to World War II than they did in the movie, but World War II makes for great movie drama, so they pushed everything up into the later 30s, even though most of this stuff had kind of happened already. Georg was offered a spot in the German Navy because of his World War I service. That really did happen, but in the movie he was like, absolutely not. There's no way I'm going to serve the Nazi regime. And he was, in real life, opposed to the Nazi regime and their principles and everything, but he thought about it real hard because they were broke, and it was going to pay some dollars. Eventually he decided, like, no, I can't actually do that. But he did consider it. Like, it wasn't like in the movie where it was like, there's not a chance, until later when it was like, no, I'm not going to do that. They offered him that slot, and when they went to escape from Austria, because the Germans were not happy about it, as they tended not to be at that time about much of anything, they actually escaped from Austria a lot less dramatically. They traveled to Italy for a performance, and Georg was born in the Dalmatia region, which is part of Italy at the time, so he was eligible for Italian citizenship, as was the rest of the family. So he was an Italian citizen, went to Italy. Italy wasn't as strict yet, and then they left Italy legally as citizens to go to the Netherlands, where they would then live for a little while, and then they went to London, and then they came to the United States. But they just walked to the train station in Salzburg and took a train to Italy. It wasn't like this big dramatic mountain thing or anything like that. It was a lot less exciting. But so they abandoned their house then, and I didn't realize this. Their house was actually the headquarters for Heinrich Himmler, like the guy who put the Holocaust together. That was like his headquarters in Austria. That was like what the Germans got there. They were like, this is a nice abandoned house, and they sent Heinrich Himmler to do his horrible business there. So go figure. And then so after the war, they were in the United States and touring around and stuff during the war. Georg died of lung cancer in 1947, and then they kind of came to the public consciousness because of the music, but also because in 1949, to help like raise some money, Maria wrote a memoir of the family's experiences, and then they made that into 2 movies in West Germany in 1956 and 1958. Those 2 movies are still considered in those 2 countries, Germany and Austria, to be the authentic story of The Sound of Music. They don't actually like the real Sound of Music that much. We'll talk about that more later as well. And then Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote the play in 1959. We'll talk a little bit more how that all came to be. One interesting fact was in the movie, Georg was not happy about them singing because he was just kind of had a stick up his rear end, you know what I mean? But let's put it bluntly. But in the real life, he wasn't happy about the singing because he was descended from Austrian royalty. He was I think it was a duke or something like that. I don't remember the exact title, but that's where the Von comes from in Austria. After the royalty was dissolved after World War I, the Von was added to kind of show like these were the people who were the royal whatever, this, that, or the other thing. It was kind of like a term of respect. So that's where the Von comes from. His real name is actually just Georg Trapp, but the Von is because he was kind of descended from some Austrian royalty and things like that. But he wasn't happy about the singing because he was kind of embarrassed that they had to sing for money. That was really the basis of it. So that was kind of altered for the film, but he was a little unhappy about it. That picture there is actually him in the World War I submarine. He's on the left there. He served for Austria-Hungary, and he was actually the most successful submarine captain of the Axis powers, not the Axis powers. What were they in World War I? My brain's breaking. Anyway, the opposite. Is the Axis still in World War I? Yeah, right? Yeah. And he was actually the most successful submarine captain in that whole war. He sunk 11 Allied submarines and displaced. It was like 200 or 2 million pounds of Allied like warship fare. So he was really very accomplished as a military commander, but he didn't want to do it for the Germans. Now, while we're on that, Edelweiss was named after the national flower of Austria, and in the film it was used to show his loyalty to Austria, even though Germany was about to take him over, which, again, that's a real life thing. He was not happy about the Anschluss. So this would be the last lyric that Hammerstein wrote before he died in 1960. This was like the last lyric he ever wrote was Edelweiss. Pretty good note to go out on, I would say. I'd be happy with that. And then so Christopher Plummer, who played Georg, actually did record the song for the film, but they dubbed him with Bill Lee, who you may be familiar with if you've seen The Jungle Book. He was one of the vultures that sang For Your Friends. And he also, at the end of Where Your Friends, like the stupid low note that the tiger sang, that was also Bill Lee. So the guy who sang Edelweiss was also Shere Khan. Fun fact. Who knew? And Plummer was really mad about it because he was like, I thought I did a really nice job. And he was really mad that they dubbed him, but they kept the dub in. Austrians do not like Edelweiss. They think it is like a mockery of Austrian musical creation. They also are mad because people think it's an Austrian folk song. It's not. That was the original song. Some people think it's the national anthem. It's not. So the Austrians didn't really like it, and like I said before, they didn't take well to this whole movie. Honestly, it was really quite a to-do over there. So we're gonna play Edelweiss, and we'll talk a little bit more after about what else is going on there.
To be clear, we like it a lot.
I like it.
Yeah.
Edelweiss. Oh, Faith has a fun fact.
But I forgot to tell you.
Okay.
They also lived in America. They lived in Marion Station, which is 3 miles.
Oh
from
yeah,
here.
they did live in Marion Station for a minute. When they first came over, they
The
settled
house
in Marion
is
Station.
3.3 miles from here.
How much?
3.3 miles.
The
from
house
here.
is 3.3 miles from here. So afterwards,
I don't
pop
know
on
if the
over
house-
there. Go bother whoever lives there now. I think there is actually a Rogers and Hammerstein museum actually not too far from here too. So if you do actually want more information, it's like within a few miles of here, so you can definitely go check that out. Okay, so one thing that they did use in this play was they tried to incorporate elements of Austrian traditional music. Now, Austria is largely known for like Mozart and like Beethoven, all those big classical composers who were born in Austria. But their their folk music tradition is also very strong. A lot of different dances and things like that. A lot of different styles came out of Austria. One is the Ländler, which they do dance in the movie at one point. That's when they're outside of the house, outside of the party dancing. That's a partner dance, like they do in the movie. And it's in 3/4, like it is in the movie. 3/4 meaning 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. It's supposed to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in 3 instead of 4. It's a waltz. It was kind of a precursor to the waltz, I should say. The ballroom dance scene in the film is not quite a traditional Ländler dance. It's based on the choreography, but it's not quite the same exact thing. That's also a reason that a lot of Austrians didn't like the movie. They were like, you guys aren't really like doing it just right. You know what I mean? Like you had all the resources in the world and you didn't quite figure this out. So that's one reason why they didn't all love it. At traditional Austrian folk dances, there is actually a goodbye song a lot of the time. Like they'll do the dance, they'll do the waltzes and the Ländlers and all that, and there'll be a little speech, and then they'll do the goodbye song. That does come up in the movie, obviously, because of So Long Farewell. We will not be playing that now because it's just too easy to play that at the end of the song or at the end of the show. It's just too obvious. You have to. What are you gonna do? The other thing in Austrian traditional music that they did use in the movie is yodeling. That was largely considered a Central European thing. Basically, it was kind of from rural communities in the Alps, Central Alps. The first historically recorded instance of it is 1545, and they think it was used to, kind of call out the flocks and things like that, and to communicate between rural towns in the mountains. And they think it's especially effective, and it developed in the Alps because you got all those mountains and all those lakes and all those big wide open spaces. And when you do those register changes really quickly, it carries and echoes really nicely in those big open spaces. So they think that's why it kind of developed in the Alps the way that it did. I'm not going to yodel for you, and again, you should once again say thank you. Basically what happens is you perform like rapidly alternating notes between your chest voice, which is like the voice that we talk in, and then your falsetto voice, which is the voice all the way up here. So you kind of alternate between those two things very quickly. The yodel-a-hee-hoo that you tend to hear, again, I will not be yodeling for you, but the one that you tend to hear, I kind of wrote it on the right. That is kind of a typical yodel thing. Those low ones, that's in your chest voice. The high ones are in your upper falsetto voice, and that's kind of what yodeling is. They'll do even faster. They'll they'll do stuff like that, like the really professional yodelers. And I'm definitely not going to try and demonstrate that for you. But it made its way over to the USA, actually, also right here in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania Dutch brought it over. The Pennsylvania Deutsch brought it over. We just refused to pronounce it correctly when they got over here, and that's why we say Pennsylvania Dutch instead of Pennsylvania Deutsch. They were German, they were not Dutch. But anyway, so they brought it over here from Germany and Austria and Switzerland. Became popular in the 1840s. There's a scene group called the Tyrolese Minstrels. Tyrol is a region in Austria. It's like a state in Austria. And so then it made its way into country music, which is where most of us know yodeling from, in the 1920s. First with the guy Riley Puckett, and then by Jimmy Rogers. Jimmy Rogers kind of is considered the father of country music and yodeling in country, or American yodeling rather, because he was kind of the one who popularized it. In the 20s, he kind of put it together with blues traditions from like African American communities and things like that. And so this made it into the sound of music in The Lonely Goat Herd, based on yodeling. The real Maria von Trapp did not like it. She said it was inauthentic yodeling. In fairness, she's probably right. But in the stage version, this was what she sang when the thunderstorm was happening to comfort the children, because it's a nice little song, but they just gave it its own marionette scene in the movie with the weird little goats and everything. The puppetry in the movie was not performed by the actors, which as you watch them, you're like, obviously not. They're just moved like they're not even kind of moving to anything. But the two leading puppeteers of the time, this is pre-Muppets, of course, Bill Baird and Cora Eisenberg did all of the puppetry for all of that scene. However, the Muppets did appropriately perform it with Julie Andrews later on. If you want to check that out on YouTube, it is well worth the watch. I think the Muppets are hilarious, though, so maybe that's just me. We're going to do The Lonely Goat Herd. Like I said, Jimmy Rogers, the father of American yodeling and things, he kind of mixed those traditions with blues traditions and things like that. And I really like Dr. John and New Orleans piano music, so we're going to do it in that New Orleans kind of style a little bit. But you'll still hear the yodels and whatnot. So here's The Lonely Goat Herd.
If you're really proud of your yodel,
Go for it.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
You think you're not a yodel? Do your thing.
we definitely don't.
Here we go.
That's the lonely goat herd in New Orleans instead of the Alps. It's fine. Cool. So, a couple of things about just how the film itself actually happened, because we haven't really talked about that yet. So, the big thing is the musical was born when Vincent Donahue, who's like a screenwriter, producer, and things like that, he saw the first two German documentaries I mentioned before, the West German documentaries, and he was like, wow, that would be great for Julie Andrews. No, Mary Martin, who sang the role of Maria originally on Broadway then. So it was supposed to feature the Austrian folk music that the Trapp family singers actually sang, but then when they brought Rodgers and Hammerstein in to write two songs, they were like, this doesn't work together. And Rodgers and Hammerstein were like, we'll do the whole thing. So they scrapped all the Austrian folk music, and that's how we got all the stuff that we're playing here now. The musical then opened in 1959 with Mary Martin as Maria. That did end up, she was the originator of the role. And then the screenplay came along 3 years later when Ernest Lehman was the screenwriter. He wrote the screenplay, and he was like, we gotta have Julie Andrews, and we gotta have Robert Wise, who was the director of the movie. Originally, they had a different person to direct, and the guy who they did have to direct was like, man, I'm not really that into this, but like, fine. And so then he got offered another movie, and he asked Lehman, he was like, can you guys wait until I'm done with this other movie? And then Lehman was like, oh no, you can't do it, what a bummer, go do the other movie. And then he got the guy he wanted in Robert Wise. So it worked out anyway. So rehearsals and filming, that started in 1964. They did it in studios in LA, and they did a lot of it on location in Salzburg, Austria. It was released in 1965. The rights issues, the Von Trapps had sold the rights to the German filmmakers, and the German filmmakers sold the rights to the American filmmakers. So the Von Trapps really didn't have very much say in how they actually got portrayed in the movie. They were largely happy with it, but there were definitely some issues. The big one being that Georg was actually the nice one. He was not the mean one, as it turns out. He was really a very present and loving father. He would make them little gifts in the wood shop. He was a really great guy. And Maria was kind of temperamental, and they were a little bit afraid of her sometimes. So go figure. Definitely a bit of a role switch there. And again, like I said before, all the events took place a lot earlier than World War II. It wasn't quite so close to the Anschluss and everything. The Anschluss is when the Germans took over Austria. We're going to play The Sound of Music. There's one other fact I wanted. It'll come back. So we're going to do The Sound of Music. This is the theme song, of course. This is a really nice one. Do you want to or no?
Do what?
You want to sing it?
I guess.
Yeah. We're small and informal here. Yeah.
This is my fiance, Faith. This is Faith. She's a singer. Just sing it. Just the way you know it. I'll play some chords at the beginning to get you we didn't practice this, but when I was arranging it, she sang it in the other room, and I was like, damn.
Oh, I was doing my puzzle.
Yeah, well, she was doing her puzzle. She was like singing along, and she's like an opera singer. She's really incredible. I was like, wow, that sounds better than it would if I played it. So here we are. So here we go. This is The Sound of Music.
Let's
was Faith Brown. On the phone. Isn't she good? I keep telling her that. All right, so that was The Sound of Music. And you'll notice that one, we talked about verses and things before and how they're always rubato. In the original musical, that one is also very like free-flowing and like not really rhythmic, you know what I mean? So that's kind of how we tried to do it there. Of course, I threw in the jazz chords because I like them. But anyway, we can't really talk about this without talking a little bit about Julie Andrews. She's real good at what she does. I think it's really fun. One of my favorite things about listening to this soundtrack was in Do Re Mi. The kids are like singing like kids, and Julie Andrews is just ripping it, just absolutely bullying them like vocally, and it's just like this was a weird combination, you know. But so she got the role of Maria after Layman and Wise saw a preview screening of Mary Poppins, which hadn't come out yet, and that was kind of her big national coming out, so to speak. So they saw the preview and they were like, we got to get her now, because if we don't, forget about it. We're never going to get her again. So they got her immediately before Mary Poppins even got released, which was good because then she won the Oscar, and then she was Julie freaking Andrews. You know what I mean? So they got her early, and she'd worked with them before on Cinderella, the TV musical, which was in 1957, and she'd also been lead in lots of things. She was in My Fair Lady. She was Eliza Doolittle. She was in Camelot. She was lead in Camelot as well. And she initially didn't want to play Maria because she'd just done Mary Poppins, and she was like, I don't want to be typecast as a nanny. So she was a little hesitant about it, but they ended up talking her into it. And it ended up being one of her favorite roles that she ever did, despite she actually didn't like the musical that much before they made the movie. She was like, that's just a little, I think the word she used was saccharine. I think it was too sweet, too cutesy. So she didn't really like it that much, but she ended up liking the role. She eventually became a Dame Commander of the British Empire. She's got every list of the greatest British actresses. She's like top 5. She's gotten awards from the Pope, from everybody. She's people like Julie Andrews. Breaking news. You really need to come here to know that people like Julie Andrews. I'm giving you the hard-hitting analysis here. We're going to do How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria here. Mary Wood was the actress who played Mother Abbess, and she was nominated for an Oscar and Golden Globe for this. She didn't win either of them, but she was nominated. She was already very famous. This is kind of the role she's best remembered for right now, but she was very famous before this. She was really happy to be in the film, but she was pretty old when she filmed it, and she was like, I don't think I can sing some of these songs, so they dubbed her with a woman named Marjorie McKay, who she really liked because she sounded like Mary Wood really liked because she sounded like Mary Wood did when she was younger. So she was like, yeah, that's the person that I want to do that, and that's who they ended up picking. And that was Marnie Nixon played Sister Sophia in the film, and also did some other dubs in the film. She was the one who kind of talked about that in her autobiography. This would be the last movie appearance that Mary Wood did. She did appear on some TV shows later on in the 60s, but this was her last movie appearance before she passed away. The real Maria was a troublemaker as a child. She lived with, her parents died young. She moved in with an uncle who was kind of like, not necessarily abusive, but had like a lot of mental health issues, so he was kind of like unpredictable and temperamental. So she was kind of a troublemaker. She was like, well, I'm gonna get in trouble no matter what I do, so I'm just gonna cause trouble. So that's what she did in real life, but she still did well in school and everything. She graduated high school at like 15, and then she went to become a teacher, and then she did eventually make it to the Nürnberg Abbey like she does in the movie. She actually was not a problem in the Abbey. Like, she was fine. She was like perfectly good at being a nun in training. So they kind of made up this part of it. But like I said before, like, she didn't want to get married to gay. She wanted to be a nun. She was like not going to cause problems. So she was actually pretty good and wasn't really a problem that needed solving. And just on another note, these nuns were so mean. Isn't that like kind of the point of being a nun, is to not be mean? But anyway, so we're gonna do How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria. This is another one with a long verse, and this one kind of works as a nice little march. So I kind of stole some Art Blakey marchy arrangements and things like that. If you're familiar with blues march, that'll be kind of what this sounds like a little bit. Here's How Do You Solve a Problem Like Maria. I might be right on time. Miracles do happen, guys. Here we go. Alright, very much was, how do you solve a problem like Maria? The answer is you don't, because she was fine. Alright, so the film's reception, it was huge. I didn't realize the extent of just how huge it was. It ran in movie theaters for 4.5 years, which is crazy to me. And it was the highest grossing film in history. It displaced Gone with the Wind, and it held the record for about 5 years, and then The Godfather surpassed it in 1972. And then after that it was Jaws and some other things. But it's still the 6th highest grossing movie of all time if you adjust for inflation. It is behind, what do I got? Gone with the Wind, Avatar, Titanic, Star Wars, and Avengers Endgame. So quite a wide variety there. But yeah, still number 6 on the list, even after all these years. Some cities saw more tickets sold than they had people in them, because people would go to see it like 2 or 3 times. So they were like selling like 2 times as many tickets as there were people in the town. And the critics hated it, because as we know, the critics are really good at nailing what's good and what's not all the time. But so they thought it was like, this is sappy, this is corny, this is ridiculous. Like the New York Times hated it, New York Post, all the New York papers hated it, all the Boston, all the East Coast cities hated it. But the smaller towns really liked it, and the West Coast cities were down with it. But they were pretty ripped apart in some of the bigger papers on this side of the country. The critics were obviously wrong. It won 5 Oscars and 2 Golden Globes and became the highest grossing movie of all time. So huge swing and a miss there on the critics' part, as it happens. So we're gonna do Climb Every Mountain next. This is the reason that Mary Wood wanted to be dubbed. This song gets up to a high, what does it get up to? A high A flat in the original key, which is all the way up here. And she was, I think, 72 when she was filming this, so that's pretty high up there for a 72-year-old. So she was like, someone should dub this. She didn't think she could handle it at that time. The real life story behind this song is in the movie they were like, you gotta go chase the man that you want, that's what you want to do, then you should go do it. Go after love and all that stuff. Virginia Lutz, who was the real abbess of the abbey when Maria was there, said that it was God's will that she should marry Georg. So you got to go do it. And she was not happy about it. Like I said, she wrote in her autobiography, she was angry on her wedding day. She was mad at God. She was mad at Mother Virgilia Lutz, mad at the new husband, because she was like, I want to be a nun, but I can't, I guess. So she was not happy about it. The song did take inspiration from some other really popular Rodgers and Hammerstein songs. A lot of the one criticism that Rodgers and Hammerstein get is that they were kind of formulaic in some of their song settings. Like it was always like, okay, here's a song where like the older woman sings to the kids, and here's the song where the man sings to the woman, here's the song where they always have a song where an older female mentor sings to a younger female protege, and that was the song. So this was based on like You'll Never Walk Alone. They did it in a bunch of their other musicals as well, so that was kind of their role. And Wood had trouble lip syncing the beginning of this song because there's a really long instrumental introduction. It's like 2 minutes long. And she couldn't figure out like where it was going to come in, and it was rubato, so it wasn't rhythmic, right? So she kind of like followed it, and she couldn't get the lip syncing right. So the reason that this scene is so dark is because she just never got it right. They were like, let's just make it dark. You can't see her mouth. It's fine. And then as soon as the song kept going, she was good to go from there. She was like, okay, now I'm on. Now I can jump on it. So they would bring her out of the light into the light eventually, but But at the beginning, they were like, she's not gonna get this, and she was like, no, I'm not. So put me in the dark, and that's how they got this scene. So we're gonna do Climb Every Mountain. They were talking about the Alps, but I wanted to do something kind of salsa-y, so we're talking about the Andes. It's still a mountain. It's all the same. So here's Climb Every Mountain. So climb every mountain in South America. It's fine. We're gonna keep on finishing up here. So the later lives of the Von Trapp family. They toured the U.S. throughout the 40s and 50s. They ended up they lived in Marion for a minute there, and then they moved up to Vermont, and they were in Stowe, Vermont, which is where they kind of had a family lodge. And that's kind of where they settled from there. In large part because it looks exactly like the Alps up there. So that was kind of their logic there. They founded a charity to help impoverished families in Austria after the war. It's called the Trapp Family Relief Fund. That was, Maria von Trapp got an award from the Pope for the work that they did with that charity, so they did a lot of good work with that. And originally they were performing, like I said, church songs, madrigals, Austrian folk songs. But when they came over, the guy who was managing them in America was like, we gotta Americanize this a little bit. So they started doing like spirituals and Appalachian folk songs and things like that, and some other songbook standards and things like that, like stuff that Rogers and Hammerstein were writing those kinds of songs as well. Georg, like I said, died at 67, and Martina, who was portrayed as Gretel in the film, actually died pretty young as well. She died from complications from childbirth. She was only 30. And the group continued to perform into 1957. Maria was kind of the one who was really trying to hold it together, but eventually they had non-family members in there by 1957, and they were like, all right, you know what, it's time, let's call it. They did some recording and stuff after, but they weren't touring and everything. And then the Trapp Family Lodge is a really popular tourist attraction in Vermont. We went up there a few years ago. It's really nice. They have a brewery. They have a frisbee golf course, a bakery. They have a big restaurant. You can stay there. They got a crazy hotel. What? Hiking trails, skiing. It's a ski resort as well. And Maria largely spent her time running that afterwards. All of the kids' names were changed in the movie. None of the names were their actual names. Rupert was Friedrich. He was a doctor in World War I, World War II. He had 6 kids. They all had 6 kids. It's probably a massive extended family at this point. Agatha was Liesel. She was a music teacher in Maryland for a long time. And she was the Liesel and Rolf subplot was completely pulled out of thin air, by the way. That there was no real life equivalent of that. They were just need some teenage romance, I guess, in there. I don't know. They just threw it in there. That's not real at all. So Maria was the other thing too was Maria. There was a Maria that was a child. They were like, that's too confusing. We're changing her name as well. So she ended up being Louisa. She was a missionary in New Guinea for 30 years. 3 of them actually ended up being missionaries in New Guinea. And she was big on the family history. Most of the male children served in World War II for the Allies then. Werner was Kurt, and he was a farmer and father to 6. They still make the cheese, the Von Trapp cheese that they make up there. Hedwig taught music in Austria and Hawaii. She was suffering from asthma her whole life, so she had a lot of health problems. She died kind of young at 55. Marta, or Joanna, was she got married and returned to Austria. There's a lot of artwork in the Von Trapp Family Lodge. She painted all of it. And then Martina, who's Gretel, was the one who died very young during a break from touring during childbirth. And then there was 3 kids that were not depicted in the film because Maria von Trapp and Georg had 3 children in addition to the 7 that they already had. So a lot of kids, so many kids. 10 is crazy. But Rosemary was the oldest. She worked as a missionary, and then she works as a naturalist in Vermont as well. Lorley was a farmer alongside her half-brother Werner, and then Johannes is the last surviving Von Trapp child. He still runs the lodge a little bit. He started the brewery. He was a missionary in New Guinea as well, but he runs the brewery and stuff up there still to this day. He's the last surviving of the original Von Trapp children, but the descendants continue to sing and run the lodge as well. Maria herself passed away in 1987, but like I said, she got awards from the Pope and various other humanitarian organizations and musical organizations and things like that. So there's 2 more? Oh no, I'm not gonna end on time. All right, we're gonna do short. I'm sorry. I thought there was only 1 more. Darn it. All right, so Something Good was not in the original stage show. It was a song called The Ordinary Couple. They didn't like it that much. Rogers and Hammerstein were actually hoping to replace it, but Hammerstein was too ill to do it, so it had to stay in. But when they were like, hey, could you do something else for this? Rogers was like, heck yeah, get this out of there. The lyrics largely kind of applied in real life, actually, to the real Marie Von Trapp and Julie Andrews. They both kind of had a tough go of it in childhood and stuff, but things ended up, I would say, working out for them. This is oftentimes in the revival level of the show thematically. It sits right where An Ordinary Couple, which was the old song, sits. They sit exactly the same, and they're about the same thing, so they will replace this pretty often. You don't hear An Ordinary Couple too much anymore. So here's something good. We're going to just play it straight up. Here we go. 2, 3, and... Nice, quick, something good. The cultural legacy of the film, like I said, one of the most popular movies of all time, end of the 60s. It was huge everywhere except for Germany and Austria. They considered the other two films to be the definitive films about this story, and they really liked those. They also didn't think that they authentically did the music, the dance, the culture, the dress, especially the clothes. They were really mad about the Austrian clothes that they had in the movie. They were like, those aren't even close to what we're actually doing here. But Salzburg tourism exploded. Most of its tourism was due to the fact that that's where Mozart was born and died, and then everybody was like, hey, we're going to see that, but also we're here for the sound of music. So it kind of blew up the tourism industry in Salzburg. Other than that, it's always on BBC, commercial free, 3 straight hours at Christmas time because they're publicly funded, so they're like, we don't need your commercials, we're just going to run this whole thing. But I thought this was super weird. I guess if nuclear war breaks out, you want some comfort TV, and this was on BBC's list. Like, if the bombs go, you know what we're putting on? It's the sound of music, which I thought was really funny. The Nazi themes were obviously a big part of why the Germans didn't like it, because they were like, hey, we're trying to forget that happened. So they tried to cut the entire third act, everything after the wedding. They were like, we don't want that. And then the people interviewed in the studio, and then the people who were like, we don't want any of that, they all got fired. So, but regardless, it still didn't really go over that big in Germany until much later. This was the first American film to be completely dubbed in foreign languages. They dubbed it with music and dialogue in Spanish, French, Italian, Japanese, and I think there's one more. That was the first one to ever do that, where they sang, and German, duh, hello. That was the first movie where they ever did that with the music and the dialogue. Usually they would just do the dialogue and they would leave the music in English. But Julie Andrews was like, no, I can do it, so she did it. Because again, she sung in Japanese. She sure did. Spanish, Japanese, all 5 of those languages. Yep, she did every single one. Because again, breaking news, Julie Andrews was good at her job. The film was is good at her job. True. Fair enough. So the film was selected for preservation in the U.S. By the government for the National Film Registry. So they've got it kind of preserved. Last song here obviously had to be "So Long Farewell." It was written as a children's song. It kind of repeats the main theme just like a whole bunch of times, and then they slow it down eventually. That's what happens. One of the most referenced songs in this, it's in Family Guy, it's in Ted Lasso, it's in whatever TV show you want. They probably did a parody on this. Charmian Carr's sister was the one who actually hits that high note. There's like the big fat, I'm not going to do it. But it's all the way up here, and the guy who played Kurt, Dwayne Chase, it was too high for him because his voice was changing, so he couldn't get it. So they brought in her sister, and they were like, "Can you dub this for us?" And that's what they did. So that's where that high note is. Thank you to Faith for that fun fact as well. Thanks for hanging out. My name's Patrick. This is Erica on bass and Zach Martin on drums. Appreciate you coming and hanging out. Thank you, Kelly Center, for having us. Thank you over on the sound booth for helping us out with the sound. And we're going to finish up with So Long Farewell. I have an email list. I do a lot of these kind of library programs and things like that on different subjects. So if you want to sign up for updates, it's right over there. I also have business cards. The picture on them is from when I was 22, and I'm starting to not look like that anymore. So if you could take one of those, you can throw it right out. I don't care. I just need to get rid of them. Here is So Long Farewell. Very much, not so much a lullaby, but that's all right. All right, thank you very much, Patrick Kerssen, Erica Golchevsky, Zach Martin. Thank you, Kelly Center. Tom.
All of these arrangements yours that
All
we
of
heard
these,
today?
except for like one, yeah.
How about it? Patrick Kerssen Trio. Amazing. There's the Von Trapp House. I grew up about a half a mile from the Von Trapp House on Marion Station Road. And from the time I was 5 years old, every time we drove by, my mother would say, "There's the Von Trapp House." And it went on for 12 years because I'm one of 8 children and I'm toward the top. So the older ones in the Volkswagen bus would go, "There's the Von Trapp House," as we went by. So Thank you all very much for coming out today. Very special performance and very informative at the same time. I loved it. It was great. Thank you for your support and your contributions. If you'd like to make a contribution on the way out, we have the Venmo QR codes out there. We have donation jars as well. Special thanks to our student sound and video techs today, May and Ella. Great job. Great job. On behalf of all the Kellys, my wife Sherry Kelly, Paul and Susan Kelly, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your contributions. Please help us clean up. There are trash and recycling containers by the doors as you exit. From the Kelly Center for Music, Arts, and Community in Havertown, Pennsylvania, I'm Tom Kelly. Stay safe, play it forward. Good day.